put is that he lives and breathes transport and held that ministry in the Conservative government. And the Liberal Democrat Simon Hughes has stormed the Citadel before when he captured the safe Labour London seat of Bermondsey 15 years ago. Whether or not they all eventually go for it, they all have strong views about the job. Now, Ken Livingstone's been busy in Germany today, but the others have found a minute to put together their personal populist promos for how they see the London Mayor's mission.
As a Londoner, this to me is simply the greatest city in the world to live. But you know, 5 years as a transport minister in this capital taught me some very important lessons. What London does need to be an even better place is an initiator, a coordinator, and perhaps above all, a voice. I'm quite clear there are three areas, key areas, where an elected mayor and assembly can really make a difference. Crime and the police, traffic and transport, both really high up on the list of what Londoners actually care about. And, of course, economic regeneration. Remember that some of the poorest boroughs in Britain are actually here in the capital city within almost yards of some of the most expensive property in the world. And the great advantage of the elected mayor proposition is that it cuts through the kind of slow process of bureaucracy that makes step change so difficult to achieve elsewhere in Britain. I'm quite clear that if the idea of the elected mayor and assembly works here in London, we're going to see it taken up in many more of the great cities up and down Britain. It's an idea, I believe, whose time has come.
One and the same time, London is three things. It's a phenomenal capital city, a great world city. It's at the top of the league and could go to the top permanently if we try really hard. It's a collection of villages, all of which are different, jewels in the crown, and need to be valued separately. And it's a great cosmopolitan place where you just have one of the great mixes of the world's cultural diversity. I guess the agenda for any mayor ought to be the agenda which people set for the mayor, not that they set for themselves. And that means, I guess, transport. People say it so often, but it's nonetheless true. A city where buses don't come only in threes and after 50 minutes, where tubes run on time and are clean, where the taxis are there when you need them. A city that really works. A city where the policing and safety is felt to be in the hands of Londoners who can shout at the government if they want to. In a city where the health service, and its strategic planning, the hospitals we close, the Barts and Guy's futures and things, are actually decided by Londoners, not by faceless civil servants. If we start reforming London government, then I hope that opens a whole agenda.
I was born in London, and my first political experience was to win a place on the Greater London Council for the seat of Romford and Hornchurch. And so for a long time, I believed in the government of London. And so I feel very strongly now we should have a mayor who represents all 8 million people. We have 32 boroughs and 74 constituencies, but no one is a voice for London, either at home or abroad. There must be strategic decisions made round the 32 boroughs. Of course, they run their boroughs very well indeed, but that doesn't mean there aren't occasions when you could bring them together and say, let's all be doing the same thing, which is vital for Londoners. One of the most unfair things London has to face is that it only gets back 75% of the 100% it pays in tax. 6 billion goes to other people, despite the fact that of the 8 worst boroughs in England, 6 are in London. The mayor should fight to see that it gets a square deal with its own money.
Geoffrey Archer, why are you so desperate to be mayor? You've got millions of quid, you've spent a lot of it on a campaign already, and you haven't been adopted by your party at all.
I haven't spent a lot on my campaign already. I've worked very hard over the last year listening and learning. I've gone around all over the place trying to find out about how things work in London. That's giving up time, and I am willing to give up time.
But you've also taken out, you've got polls, you've got different companies operating, you've got an amazing website which I have visited. All this without even knowing whether you're going to have the imprimatur of the Tory party.
No, well, I think it would be insulting to arrive at the last moment and say, I'm the obvious man. I haven't done any work, by the way, and I haven't shown any real interest, but please would you choose me? I think they might just be an inch more impressed if they'd seen for the last year you've been working 19 hours a day.
Stephen Norris, you haven't decided whether to go for it, but what Geoffrey Archer's saying there is because you'd be a Johnny-come-lately, you hadn't really done any work anyway.
I don't think you could put a sliver between us as it happens.
Wait a minute, you rang me, so this is not true, it was another mistake. You rang me and said you were glad I was joining the field. Steve was ahead of me, actually.
I'm sure that is right.
Steve was ahead of me.
Can I just, I think the important thing is, quite frankly, that what you want, and frankly the political party background is almost irrelevant in this context, is somebody who is, you know, first, second, third and last, a Londoner who actually wants this job enough because they want the city to succeed. Yeah. And, you know, whether you take Geoffrey's course or indeed any other, I think the important thing is how, you know, that you do have somebody who's enormously committed to the city.
Well, of course, Ken Livingstone has demonstrated in the past that he's enormously committed to the city. Ken Livingstone, you may be on the NEC, but if it's down to the NEC, you may well not be the chosen candidate. Would it be better to go down the Conservative way and go for one member, one vote?
I'm certain that's what we will do. I don't think, given Tony Blair's commitment to one member, one vote, that we could possibly do otherwise. If the Labour candidate who emerged was the result of a stitch-up, then the Tory opponents would just hang that round the neck of the candidate and discredit and hobble them all the way through the campaign.
Well, you talk about the Tory candidates, but then presumably if you were true to if you are true to your convictions and they don't go for one member, one vote, and it is, as you believe, a stitch, then why are you saying that you won't stand as an independent?
I made my commitment to the Labour Party 30 years ago and I'll stay in it till I die. I don't believe the Labour Party will do anything other than have one member, one vote. We would look ridiculous if we had a system less democratic than the Tories and the Liberals.
Simon Hughes, if you don't go for it, will there be any Liberal Democrat going for it?
Well, we've got to make the decision as to whether we will put up a candidate. I assume we will, because you're not in politics and in political parties to stand aside when there's an election. So once the referendum goes ahead on the 7th of May, and I'm sure that will say yes, we will, I'm sure, then decide, yes, we're going to fight the Assembly seats and the mayoral seat, and we will choose in the normal way. And as Ken says, and as I think my colleagues agree, it has to be on the basis that members have a vote each.
But you, I mean, obviously we were asking you to make a sort of pop promo and you were putting forward your ideas, but presumably you do feel passionately that you want to be mayor.
No, I feel passionately about London. I feel passionately that London's got to be well run, and there's a personal decision we have to make. Geoffrey's made his, Ken has just made his. I will make mine. I'm under pressure to make it, and I'll make it before the end of the year.
You'll make it before the end of the year. Geoffrey Archer, is this all in your blood? Because there's some thought that perhaps you had a relative in Bristol who was mayor of Bristol. Is that something from your heritage?
No, it isn't in my blood at all. I've always been in politics. I love politics. And I think the other two are exactly right. If you don't want this job, and if you don't care about Londoners and Londoners' views, and I also feel strongly that that person will have to have the courage to stand back and be independent of his party on many occasions, whoever is living in Downing Street.
Well, this is a nighttime conversation, but the hustings are going to get rough and tough, and there will be some heavy-duty questions asked. Now, the two people that have said they are going for it anyway are Ken Livingstone and Geoffrey Archer. I'm going to ask each of you to ask each other a question. If you were in the hustings, Ken Livingstone, what would be the question you'd put to Geoffrey Archer?
If the government doesn't allow you to have some of London's money back, are you going to fight for the right to be able to increase the taxes? Because the big lie of current British politics is you can improve the quality of life without spending money.
Geoffrey Archer.
I agree with that totally. If we don't have enough money to do the job, it will hardly be worth doing. Ken and I, there's no issue looking like that, Kirsty. Ken and I disagree
I'm just looking at Stephen Norris, who's shaking his head furiously.
On very little. I don't think I would have liked, and I asked for, as did the Liberals, asked for a third question, which was, do the people of London want to be taxed? So that if they turned it down, one would be in a position to say, fine, but if they said, yes, we will allow you to tax, then we could have gathered that money for the things like the underground, which desperately need to be done.
Well, just before we finish this, you have to have your chance of asking Ken Livingstone. What would you ask him in the hustings?
Ken, it is being suggested that the mayor could only have 220 to 250 people to serve him. The GLC
was used to a lot more.
The GLC ended up with 17,800. How long would it take you to get from 250 to 17,800?
Well, when I was leader of the GLC, I had 8 personal staff. The others were all doing useful things like putting out fires, running the buses, running the tube, and building the Thames barrier.
Well, we'll just wait and see exactly how powerful the mayor might be, because when people talk about powerful mayors, they typically think of cities like Paris, New York and Chicago. Newsnight intrepid traveller Michael Crick spent the day in Chicago with their top cat to find out what a difference a daily makes.
Chicago, home of the blues, capital of the Midwest.
Now, when I was a young boy, at the age of 5,
America's third biggest metropolis, centred on a bustling, vibrant city of 3 million people. And historically, nowhere has more of a tradition of boss politics. The powerful elected mayor who runs his city with an iron grip.
I thank the people of Chicago for their vote of confidence in my public record.
The biggest boss of all was Richard J. Daley, first elected in 1956 and Chicago mayor for more than 2 decades. Indeed, Daleys have run this city for all but 12 of the last 42 years, as today Richard M. Daley occupies his father's spot in the limelight.
I want more. I want to make this a better city. Right, I can't just have... I don't want to be Manhattan.
Mayor Daley has a finger in every Chicago pie. Yesterday he launched the city's Millennium Plans, the kind of tourism and culture role that the London mayor will enjoy too. But Daley also has large responsibilities, such as libraries and street cleaning, that in London the boroughs will retain. Daley believes that the new London mayor, just like he has, should aim to expand his powers over time.
You accumulate power and then sometimes, it's accumulated over, many, many years. And also it's a role of the individual, what role you want to become. I'm the only mayor in the United States that really has control over the Board of Education. No one else does. I wanted that. I sought it out to improve the quality of education here in the city of Chicago.
Chicago's schools were known as the worst in America, until 3 years ago, Mayor Daley took them over from the state of Illinois. Now, Samuel Morse Elementary on Chicago's rundown west side is improving rapidly, thriving on the greater direction and focus that comes from being run, ultimately, by one man.
Well, just the fact that he has taken control and appointed a very competent board has made us accountable for what we do in our schools. When I say us, I mean the principals. Because the principals are accountable, teachers are now accountable. And teachers are accountable, so students are accountable. And because the students are accountable, their parents are accountable. So it's like a trickle-down effect. Everybody is responsible for what's going on with the education. If he had not stepped in to take over, I don't think that would have happened.
So it's clear that a strong-willed and powerful mayor like Richard Daley can make a real impact on a school like this. But as far as the government's proposed new mayor of London, well, he's not going to have any responsibility for education or schools. The new London mayor will have some responsibilities for the police, but with nothing like the same control Mayor Daley has over law enforcement here.
What's going on, guys?
5 years ago, the Chicago force adopted a radical new program of community policing, all at Daley's instigation.
This mayor has his hand on everything. He's interested in what goes on. He's really interested in police work. And I think that's because he was a former prosecutor here. He knows what the system is. He knows what the downfalls are. He knows what the upsides are. If he can get us some help, he's willing to help us.
So the mayor shouts, you jump.
Yeah.
You think of him as your boss?
He's my boss, right.
And that boss argues he needs a complete range of responsibilities and powers to run Chicago effectively.
Police department, sanitation, the library, the Board of Education. If I didn't have these, then why would you want to be mayor? That library is connected to that school is connected to the police station is connected all to the community. They're all interconnected. There's no islands in cities. There's no islands. And if you look at government being islands, then you're greatly mistaken, because then you basically have a city of not really working together.
Chicago suggests that a directly elected mayor can make an enormous difference, providing he has sufficient political clout and enough powers, and certainly more powers than the government envisages for the new mayor of London. But the experience of the Windy City also suggests certain disadvantages to having a powerful city boss. And that's the way in which those powers can sometimes be abused, something that Mayor Daley and his father before him have both been accused of. Chicago is seeing a building boom, something else for which Richard Daley takes credit. But with council construction work and other city contracts, a disproportionate number go to Daley's friends and cronies, says the Chicago Tribune, which calls it government by favors.
In almost every major large contract, there is some kind of cronyism involved, be it an attorney who gets hired by the firm who has connections to the mayor, be it a person who's a lobbyist who has made large donations to the mayor. On every major city contract, those kinds of forces collide in this city.
I guess I know a lot of people, I do. I mean, I'm the mayor, everybody knows me and everybody considers them my friend. You know, yeah, I'm the friend of the mayor, so that happens, you take it with the territory.
But, I mean, you're saying that you don't favor your friends?
No, because if they don't do the job, they destroy you right out.
The mayor's office has now become so powerful that the 50 elected members of Chicago's council are widely considered to be a rubber stamp for approving decisions by a man who considers the detail of everything. Yesterday, it was the ideal wattage for new street lamps. It may forgo many of the niceties of democratic politics, but most Chicagoans think the system works.
If we would run our city like a university seminar, this city would lose a fourth of its population in 5 years. We don't like the situation of people sitting around talking about things. Get the darn thing done. So yeah, some of the niceties of democracy are sometimes overlooked. On the other hand, our streets are clean, the services are fantastic, garbage is collected. The basic fundamentals of Chicago work, and they work better than almost any place else in America.
In essence, the City of the Blues has decided that government by one man leads to greater harmony, more decisiveness and efficiency, compared with the checks and balances, the delays and deadlock of running things by committee. And if the people of Chicago don't like the results, next year at least, as every 4 years, they can vote for someone else.
Michael Crick in Chicago. Isn't that the problem, Stephen Norris? To be truly successful and truly make a difference, you have to be pretty omnipotent. And the fact is that this is not going to allow for an omnipotent mayor.
The London proposals will not. No, I'm afraid I think that is
and you've met Mayor Daley.
A problem. Yes, I have, but I don't, not I may say, to discuss the details of how he operated as a mayor. The great impression you get in Chicago, and I know Jeffrey had the same impression when he was in New York, is exactly as reflected in the film.
But is that what you need? I mean, is this...
Well, I'm afraid I think you do. I mean, you can go down the conventional model, which, after all, is what we've gone down for generations, and the product of that is relatively inefficient, rather slow decision-making, and what cities need is absolutely up-to-the-minute ability to make decisions quickly.
Yeah,
that's what Chicago has got, and you can see Chicagoans saying they like it.
Isn't that the case, Ken Livingstone, that to make a difference, you have to have a mayoral system like Mayor Daley's, where he can move, he can change things very fast, he can have an impact on education and so forth?
What will hold you back from changing things in London is the government isn't giving you independent fundraising powers and is retaining too many controls. What I don't like about the new system is the huge powers for the mayor vis-à-vis the Assembly, which is very weak. Sounds very much like the situation in Chicago. And what you get when you've got that all-powerful individual is a target. Big business targets that individual, you have cosy arrangements, contracts get awarded, and that's what I find very worrying. I don't want to go down the American road because I think corruption is much more endemic in their system.
Well, in fact, you pick up on corruption, and we did set an email and fax line open for people during the week to contact us and tell us what the most important thing they thought was about the mayor. Now we've got an email from Peter Reid in Beckenham, and he worries about what he calls the enormous potential for corruption, given the concentration of power in the mayor's hands, and he's asked if there's plans to limit how long a mayor can hold office. But Jeffrey Archer, look at that, the allegations of cronyism in Chicago and of course in New York as well, and look at a lot of what happens in local government in this country. Isn't there a real problem with the possibility that there could be problems of corruption?
I think much more likely in 20 years' time.
Why?
The current situation is that the new mayor will have a strategic look at all the boroughs, but most of the planning, most of everything that's going on will be retained by the boroughs. I think it'll be a long time before this mayor has the sort of power that they have in New York.
But do you want them? You spent a week
in Chicago.
You spent a week in New York. I mean, do you take Stephen Norris's view that if this is going to work, it's got to be much more like that system? It's got to be the mayor's got power over the boroughs?
I certainly came back convinced that Giuliani not only knew what he was doing, but despite the fact that there were 55 Democrats on the council and 5 Republicans only, and he's a Republican, he went over the top always of the council, talked to the people, and got his way.
Is that good for democracy?
His power was, well, he stood up and said, this is what I want to do for New York. Do you agree with me? And when they did, he got his way. Now, that was the strength of his personality. When you look like that and say, is it good for democracy? It's good that someone has the courage to stand up and say, this is what this city wants. I'll fight for it.
But Simon Hughes, look at the record in this country in local government. It is not an unblemished one.
No.
And presumably what we're doing here is we are actually creating the kind of climate where exactly that kind of corruption could fester again.
Because I think we've learnt the lesson from local government. The corruption normally comes when there's a single-party state. And that's where the problem has been most recently and in the past. Now, there would be the same problem if you had somebody in power for a very long time as mayor, and the proposals, interestingly, don't limit that. The frustration would come, and I think Ken and the rest of us probably agree, if the government doesn't allow you, A, to be free from their apron strings, or B, to really get on with the job. And that's what I think all of us say. Well, I agree with Ken strongly that you need a better balance between the mayor and the assembly. But the total body, the authority, needs to be able to get on with raising the money, going for the money, asking the people to pay more money, and getting on with it.
Well, let's pick up on another point that came up, and that comes from Dave Hart from Downing College in Cambridge. He emailed us to ask, do the candidates want London to stand alone with its mayor, where they welcome mayors popping up in Birmingham, Nottingham, like the idea of mayors popping up everywhere? Stephen Norris, is that good for democracy? Another layer of democracy?
I think
another layer of bureaucracy?
in my sort of pop film that I thought there was no doubt that if it works in London, you'll see other cities saying, why is this?
But is it a model for democracy? Nick Rainsford called
that
model for democracy.
I think it
what you've got
definitely
to remember is
the powerful mayor model is certainly. Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, there are 2 issues here. I mean, one is the question of how well you control a single powerful individual. And I actually thought it was rather surprising that the white paper suggests that members of the assembly will be appointed by the mayor to the various bodies that he controls. Now, that actually is an extraordinary even the deputy mayor.
Peter Sykes from Mid-Calder in West Lothian says, how many problems in the UK in the past have been solved by the creation of another layer of politicians?
Sorry, can I just point out one thing? London is not going to be like the others. London is 8 million people, 791 square miles, bigger than Switzerland, an economy bigger than Sweden, a turnover in finance bigger than Russia's. Do you know how many cities make up London in the rest of Britain? 16. This will not be the same.
This is all. He's obviously getting into go mode here, and he may not well be chosen for the Conservative Party. But listen, I just need very quick.
London is governed anyway, but just by people who aren't elected.
Right. Well, let's just ask you to put on look into your crystal ball and say first of all who your ideal candidate would be if it weren't you. Ken Livingstone, who would your ideal candidate be if it's not you?
It would be whoever the Labour Party chooses in my place.
Why are you so diplomatic? It doesn't come easy.
Well, the truth is, whether it's Trevor Phillips, Glenda Jackson, Frank Dobson, these are all people I've worked with for decades, and I will work with in the future.
Stephen Norris, if it's not you, who will it be?
You wouldn't get me to say a name, you know, as long as we sat here all night. I don't think that's really the issue. I think it's perfectly possible we haven't even heard the name
Richard Branson?
Of the people who may be around. It's interesting that Londoners do like the idea of somebody who isn't an old politico, and I think that is maybe a card that might one of these days be played.
Simon Hughes, if it's not you?
They're desperate to have an efficient
if it's
manager.
Not you, who will it be?
I'm going to answer your question. I think Chris Patten would be a very good mayor. And he ran Hong Kong very well, and I think he could apply that experience to London. The reality is he doesn't want to stand and be defeated.
Chris Patten would have your vote. Jeffrey Archer would have your vote if it's not you.
If Chris beat me in the open time, or Steve beat me, I'd support them 100%. And if they won the Tory vote, they'll become the mayor.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Well, President Clinton brought new meaning to an old phrase today when he said the